So in this video, we're going to look at all three sets of review problems. So how many solutions, solve using the quadratic formula, exponents with the base of I. So the A value is 3, B is 6, and C is 5. Just a quick note here that the problem we're solving for the discriminant is actually the first problem in the quadratic formula problem. So b squared minus 4ac, that's my discriminant, so it's going to be 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5. That's going to be 36 minus 60, so that's negative 24. So we end up with two imaginary solutions for this one, since the discriminant is negative. Using the quadratic formula, which is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So again, the b value is 6, so it's going to be opposite of 6. Plus or minus the square root of the discriminant, which you actually have already solved. It's negative 24, all over 2 times the a value, which is 3. So we get negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 24, all over 6. Now the square root of negative 24. Negative 24 has the negative 1 as a factor, and then the 24. So what we're looking for, does the 24 have a perfect square factor? And if so, the answer is yes. And if so, we're going to select the largest number, and that would be 4. So this problem is going to become negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times 4 times 6. That's what we're going to replace the negative 24 with. So like the Grassl math activity, we're going to separate that into 3 square roots. So the final answer is going to be square root of 4 is 2, square root of negative 1 is I, root 6, all over 6. Now, one of the things that we have not talked about a lot is simplifying the fraction. And so the numbers 6 and 2 both have, all three numbers have a factor of 2. So if I remove the factor of 2 out of the 6, I'm going to be left with negative 3 plus or minus. If I remove the 2 out of the 2 plus 1, I'm left with a 1, root 6 over 6. And if I remove the factor of 2 out of the 6, what I'm left with is 3. So basically I'm dividing everything by 2. That's the negative 6, the 2, and the 1 to get the simplified fraction. And keep in mind that you've been doing that with the Grassl math activity. You'll continue to do that today with the Grassl math activity that you were given. So keep in mind that with those fractions, you just pull that denominator up into the numerator. It will create separate fractions, and if it can be simplified, it will either simplify it for you or separate it into those common factors. Because of time, I'm going to move on to the I problems. So I to the 23rd, we're doing a bunch of I squares, so we can make 11 groups of 2. Out of 23, 11 times 2 is 22. There's 1 left over, which tells me the answer is going to either be an I or a negative I. So the square I squared is negative 1, so we do negative 1 to the 11th times I. If you put negative 1 to the 11th in your calculator, you're going to get negative 1 as your answer. So it's going to be negative 1 times I, so the final answer is negative I. In the second problem, again, we're making I squares because, again, we know the value of I squared is negative 1. We can make 15 of those. That's 30 I's, just 1 left over. So we have negative 1 to the 15th power times I. If you put negative 1 to the 15th power in your calculator, you'll get negative 1. So you can multiply that to I to get a final answer of negative I again. In the third problem, I squares, we can make 20 of those. And that's actually exactly 40. So it becomes negative 1 to the 20th power, and that's a positive 1 answer. You take it in your calculator. And then the last one is going to be, again, I squared. And that's going to be the 27th power, because 2 times 27 is 54. So it's going to be -1 to the 27th power. And if you stick that in your calculator, you'll get a final answer of -1. Again, since 2 times 27 is 54, and you're doing I to the 54th power, there are no i's left over. Hopefully that gives you, again, a real clear understanding of how the problems should be done, and hopefully you have completed them correctly. If not, part of our growth mindset, we'll continue to work on these problems as we prepare for our test on Friday this week.